Yeah.
So thank you, Tanmoy. That's one thing I realized was there are surface meanings and there are deeper meanings. We should be conscious, whatever discipline we pursue, whatever politics we pursue. I think broadly that is the message I would take from your presentation. I'm sure we have lots of questions from the audience. We'll take it from here. Neeta,
Yeah,
can
if
you
there's
take
any
it?
question, I'm happy to answer.
Yes. So we've had lovely participants and audience in the last 3 days asking very interesting questions. So I'm looking forward for questions today. I don't have any in the chat yet. Participants, if you can start putting in your questions in the chat box, and we will begin with Dr. Tanmoy. But while we wait, I just wanted to mention about a question that was asked in one of the days about, sign language variation within India itself. And there was a very interesting that someone from Tamil Nadu may find it very difficult to talk to someone from North India. Both of them are deaf. They find it very, very difficult to communicate. And that was the question. So we had the practitioner view, practitioner's experience being aired. I said it is not difficult at all. It is only probably an initial need for understanding the difference in that particular lexicon or that particular sign. But then later on, things are free-flowing. And you have given the same understanding through a linguistic perspective of how variations are not a deterrent for communication or understanding between two deaf people at all.
Yeah, so this is one point which is probably requires much more discussion. But one thing that I can say, which is related to this question, this issue observation, is that you must have gone through the so-called stereotypes of sign language at the beginning. And one of the stereotypes that they are much more uniform than spoken languages. So that's one of the stereotypes of sign language. And that stereotype emerges from this dominant idea that sign language uses something which is more iconic, So basically, the common understanding of sign language is that these are set of gestures. So they don't, the common understanding is that, okay, we all engage in gestures and sign language uses a more refined form of gestures. But that is, of course, far from truth. If you study sign language and you find that it is actually not that, commonly iconic. So iconic meaning, like, let's say, certain signs are very similar to the activity that the sign talks about. So that's not always the case. And there is quite a lot of discussion within the sign language literature trying to show that that is a common misunderstanding. But this common misunderstanding gives rise to the other misunderstanding that therefore sign language are more uniform across the world. And that's also not true. So there are varieties of the similar nature that you will find in sign language. But it is true that because of the kind of modality that sign language uses, which is space, it is perhaps easier to figure out the differences quicker. Okay, so I think you probably have seen some two deaf people sitting at an airport will start conversing, after immediately. That's the usual approach people have. But at the same time, they will be able to actually communicate pretty soon. They will, especially if your flight is delayed, then you actually end up learning the differences very fast. Okay. And because of the modality, you don't have the very things that I talked about today, sound, the differences of sounds and differences of kinds of, let's say, arrangement of words or the order of words. All those, if you get rid of, who knows, even spoken language would happen. Also easy to figure out within a few hours, couple of hours or something, figure out more or less so that you can communicate, not that you completely sign the other language, that you learn BSL in like 2 hours. It's not like that, but you're able to communicate certain basic communication. It is possible to establish within much fewer time frame. So you will notice this in sign language conferences. You might wonder, how that happens, international conferences. Okay, so they have some kind of international sign, but not everybody knows. So a lot of conversation outside the talks and all happen through this kind of intensive interaction where people figure out the differences across the varieties, even major varieties. We're not talking about Chennai and Delhi, but major variety differences also people are able to figure out. So that I think is needs to be shown properly, but I think that is true.
So we have a question. We have questions coming up. So one is from Sonal Sinha. She says, we find linguists working on sign language. Are there some sign language speakers who are linguists?
Yeah, that is a very sad sort of situation because of that, and that takes me to the whole, politics of education, really, the dominant way that education is imparted, and more or less all disabled people have similar um, experiences of the difficulties one faces while educating through education, going through university education or school education. But deaf people especially face much more problem because if you think, reflect a little bit, education is dominantly, especially in our tradition, so-called Eastern tradition, dominantly based on speech. Okay, so that is one of the issues where very difficult. So there are deaf students who are there in the classroom and they sort of go through it without raising an issue about it, and they somehow cope with it, and many people just fall out. So education level literacy, of course, is very less compared to, let's say, blind students. And that's one of the reason is not that deaf students are lazy or something, but because of the dominant mode of imparting education is speech based. Okay. But things are changing quite a bit, quite clearly. So we have not been able to get a deaf student in linguistics. There are quite a few. I mean, of course, I'm talking about India. Okay, very few in India. Shivaji, for example, actually studied linguistics, but left the uh, left the program because of this. He was admitted to JNU many years ago, and he left the program because of this whole issue that they are not sort of included. There is no accessibility. Okay, and when we started Equal Opportunity Cell in 2006 in Delhi University, 2007, we identified some deaf students for the first time, and we provided support. Then we started, of course, sign language courses, etc. But it's not possible otherwise in a general classroom to make the changes that we want to make because of how this state of education is in a vast country like ours. But things are changing mainly because the mode of education is also changing. Okay, so you'll find that uh, deaf students are extremely sort of uh, good with computers, etc. Okay, that maybe this is also becoming a stereotype, but most of them are quite good with computers, and they are able to get lots of things in the form of sign. and they get able to get lots of things otherwise through internet, which was not the case earlier. The only problem is that you still need to be able to read and write, and that reading writing itself is not happening the way it should happen. So him probably will remember we tried in Delhi University this collaboration with deaf students. So when I started, actually I started these courses, sign language courses, I insisted on having deaf teachers only, not hearing teachers. Only deaf teachers will teach, and it worked very well. And some of the students, and very good examples exist. Some of the students, one of my student, of course, she did research, and now she's doing this. She got a job in this ISL RTC. Two of my students, and one finished a PhD. The other is doing PhD from Germany, and they got employed into the sign language institutes to be able to, in fact, impart knowledge through sign language. Okay, so the students started going to this university programs which were created for deaf students, and they, because they were more or less good in signing, they're able to, let's say, teach economics or English or whatever, reading of English, and teaching economics and other subjects to undergraduates through sign. So it worked, but then many things like many other things like in our country, it didn't work for after some time. So this collaboration broke down, but ISL RTC is doing work, and hopefully there will be more literate deaf students, so who are not only just good at computers, because not everything is available in the video format and sign format. You will still have to read, so that I think there'll be better, and then hopefully there'll be more people looking at linguistic structure of sign language.
Right. Thank you for answering that, and thanks, Sonal, for that question. We have Dr. Shweta Singh asking, I just wanted to ask, rather say that when language is different for different regions or countries, then of course the sign language has to be different for different languages. So how a person can learn a global sign language? Is English a good option?
No, there's some problem with this question. First of all, it is not of course, right? Because this is another common misconception. Let's say a deaf child growing in Tamil Nadu, you will expect that child to have the same kind of cultural inputs that comes through language. Like, let's say one thing that I have studied, let's say this great venerable tradition, Indian tradition of showing respect to the elders, and all the moralities based on that, very much of that, a lot of that we get from through language, from our culture, whatever culture you're in. But then that the deaf child is actually deprived of that. So in fact, the morality is bound to be different. Okay, and I have experienced this myself with not deaf people, but also other disabled students as well, that the sense of morality varies to some extent. So I may assume a Bengali deaf child to be quote unquote Bengali in that sense, but she or he may not be at all, because they don't share the same cultural baggage, good or bad, with me, those cultural baggage which comes through language dominantly. Okay, there are certain things which are not through language, to cultural festivities, etc., that is shared, but something which comes through language can be completely different. So there is nothing like, of course, a child growing up in Tamil Nadu, a deaf child will have a different language. The language culture, the equation breaks down there already. Now, they're going to be different because of variation that exists in other parts okay, like spoken language variation that exist. And the differences are in, like, let's say, majorly in naming, or naming of objects, naming of processes, okay, naming of actions. So the labels that we do often, and that comes out from within the deaf community. So the deaf community in Tamil Nadu will have that variation, not because of Tamil, you know, not because of Tamil, but because of the deaf community itself will create that variety. And that has been the case with other varieties as well. It is not that, oh, Hindi is like that, therefore whoever is speaking, or whoever is signing in North India will have this. Okay. No, but cultural things. Let's say you put certain kind of bindi, or certain kind of way of wearing your sari, or the terms associated with those. Yes, they will differ because of the cultural things. But not everything in language is culture based. Okay, so this is one issue which we need to first of all understand. Now, global language. So, if you are there in my answer to the first question, like Anita's question, in fact, the first response that I gave was that there is something called International Sign Language, which is usually employed during international conferences. For example, SIGN, Sign Conference, very well known. Okay, it was held in India also. Sign Conference. There it is, International Sign Language, and that sometime there are special courses available for that. And sort of a, you could say it is not really a global language as such, like English is, but it is a language for mostly for conference, attending conference, etc., where people can understand each other quickly. Like somebody is giving a talk, if they give it in like ASL, and the audience is, let's say, ISL, then there might be an issue. But in the day-to-day interaction, in even interactions within the conference spaces and things like airport and hotels and all that, people try to figure out each other's language, and because it is based on the space as modality, not sound, there are certain things which are faster. Apart from the fact that, you have to have that kind of attitude that I really want to speak to this sign, to this, communicate with this person. You also have the ability to figure out each other's signs, at least the differences.
Right. I'm sorry, I just took over from Amrish because
Yes, I saw that.
great. Yeah. Right. So I also want to add to what you said, Dr. Tanmoy, if I may, that this is a common misconception that sign language is dependent on spoken language, and which is also a, a cause or way forward for the signed structures that
Yeah.
in the sign structure or
Yes.
the different structures that they have. So I think that is a big misconception that a language, be it sign language or any other language, is dependent on another language. So no other language is dependent on any other language. Sign language is also an independent language. Yeah.
The other way is true, Nita. Maybe spoken languages are hugely dependent on our capacities to use body's expressions, our kinetic, our movements, our reflexes, etc. I mean, that's the point about universal grammar, I think. We have a linguistics professor here, but I thought I will. The other way may be true, but not this way.
So yes, so we have from Ram. Says, sir, can't we introduce some portion of syllabus on sign language in our regular school and colleges? that everybody can communicate basic thing with deaf persons.
Yeah, that is a very good point. In fact, some innovative teachers or school principals, etc., they have tried this, but I think it should be taken up as a policy. Okay, so it could be one of the languages on offer, because especially when now we have quite a few trainers, we don't have a lot, but quite a few trainers who can train. And I think the government only has to make the adjustment in their thinking and think of deaf teachers. If we don't have deaf teachers, then it will be impossible. So there is a misconception that deaf teachers will not be able to teach because they won't be able to hear what the student is asking. But that's actually not a sound sort of conception, because you get the best French education. French, if you want to learn French, you have a French in Alliance Française, you have French teachers who are teaching you French, who refuse to, in fact, switch to English or any vernacular language. So, and that is the immersion, language immersion, and acculturation idea of language learning. And the old method of rote learning or grammar learning is a very old method. It's not used at all. So that would be a very good idea, and one could introduce some very basic concepts which I think children will find very interesting also and attractive. And children acquire this much sort of with not just fun and enthusiasm, but without any bias. That's an interesting thing. I remember a long time back for a visit to this very well-known school in Delhi, Amarjyoti School, founded by Uma Tuli, and she is still the chairperson, I think. And there, the sign language was not really used in the classroom. That's what I noticed. I went as a disability expert, not as a sign language expert as such, but we noticed that children, the deaf children, who are outside the class when they're playing, they are just communicating with sign language, right? So in the classroom, sign language is not being used, but they sort of pick up and then they influence their peer, the hearing friends, to also pick up the sign language. So many of the hearing peers, children, they pick up sign language, at least the basic rudimentary sign language, very quickly. So this will be actually a great way to not only sensitize children, and when these children will become adult, to disability issues right from the beginning, instead of going through. These days you have this EVS in school, where you have some compulsory chapter on disability, and in most cases those are still very full of stereotypical biased kind of view of disability in general. But this will be a practical hands-on kinds of experience that children will understand the concept of disability much better. They will be more sensitive to people with disability, and they will additionally learn a language. And that if this happens successfully at a mass scale, then we'll have many teachers, deaf teachers, and sign language could be an alternative mode of education. Sign language could be your choice of so-called other language, the third language formula, etc.
I think Neeta was mentioning this point yesterday, right, Neeta? In your experience in schools with children.
Yes. One was that we experienced now. We are running projects in the rural areas of India to work with mainstream deaf children in the village government schools, where there is a community-based approach that we follow to sensitize the school, the teachers, the peers, and where sign language is also taught to everybody to be able to communicate with, even if it's just one deaf child in the school, and be included in the assemblies. So where the peers are actually, learning it as another language. Introduce it to them not from our rights-based attitude, but we introduce it like a child would like, learning a different language. It's something that's very unique, and you can talk secrets from people hide away things by talking in sign language from
Yeah.
the room to another and such things. You just make it fun for them, and then they learn it. They really
Play-based,
include. Sorry.
a play-based learning
Yeah.
instead of
Right. Yes. And also, I remember mentioning that in UK now they have been advocating and lobbying for inclusion of BSL as one of the choices of languages that anybody can learn in
Take,
school.
yes.
Yeah, so I think that's already taken up, if I'm not wrong. So that is something that is inspirational for other countries.
There is also, another issue. I mean, I didn't want to prolong the discussion, but there is another issue which is should be spoken along with this discussion, which is that as since you mentioned UK, there were this really poor boroughs of Brixton where one school adopted not sign language as such, but general inclusive policies. So inclusive policies which are designed for disabled children, so all disabilities. So in terms of teaching learning material, in terms of imparting education, etc. And it was noticed that within a few years, that school became, one of the they have some term for them, one of the top 20 schools of whole of United Kingdom, which was a poor, struggling borough of London, where usually there was a financial issues and poor children is to come. But after adopting this inclusive policy, the whole school sort of improved, not just disabled children within the school, but other children as well. And like repeatedly, some of us have shown in our writing and talks is that it is not really an adjustment of the disabled child in the classroom that we have to do, but it is the whole classroom ethos has to change. And that change, which is triggered by, let's say, a deaf child or a blind child, is actually something which is going to then be improve the whole class itself. The whole class will benefit from it. In fact, the one example that I give is innovative teacher trying to, instead of draw some kind of mythical animal on the board or talk about it in very many sentences, she just makes a model of it and passes it around in the school. Like many such teachers do exist in not just experimental schools but other schools as well. Now, that if that becomes a dominant teaching learning methodology, then it actually that mythical animal, even you will remember when you do not have to have any disability, but after 50 years also you'll remember because of that tactile sensation that you had when you were like 4 or 5, of that shape of that mythical animal. So you'll remember probably the word, and although it is not culturally familiar to you, you still would know about it. So that was one example which I normally use to show that this will aid in general improvement of education.
Thank you for those thoughts. Dr. Dave, I just want to do a quick time check with you. It's 5:43, and I think
another
sorry.
5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, maximum.
Okay, right. So there are two questions still remaining here in the chat, and they both are pertaining to linguistics. And if I can just combine these two, probably talk sign language linguistics in particular. So do we have such a stream in India? And also the question is on, can we put hands-on computational part of linguistics apart from just phonetics and phonology? And also the other question is pertaining to, can we have a unit in the Masters of Linguistics class? There is all theory, but can we have more practical topics?
Yeah, why not? I mean, we have in our syllabus included sign linguistics, that it is possible, and within sort of cumulative-based system, one can easily do it even at the undergraduate level. Unfortunately, in linguistics is not usually taught in the undergraduate level. That's another disadvantage. You get to learn mostly in universities at your postgraduate level in India, and then within 2 years you sort of cram up all the topics of linguistics. That's a problem. But it is possible to introduce it slowly, slum units of it, like I don't know about Tamil Nadu, but in Delhi, at least about 15 years ago, I think 20 years ago, they introduced this degree called BL-Ed, Bachelor of Elementary Education. It's a 4-year program, and they introduced a couple of papers of linguistics. So the advantage was that some of our students got jobs there, but also they could introduce basic concepts of sign linguistics there. And I think that would sort of prepare them for linguistic studies in a better way. And of course, the same thing that I was saying about introducing sign language at school level. You could also introduce the some of the deaf issues within that sign linguistics unit. So somebody said that they learned it as part of their masters as sign linguistics, but just the theories, which is sort of unfortunate because just the theories is not going to help. So as somebody asked, we don't have we don't have deaf linguist, and Shivaji could be the only exception who I don't know if he would like to call himself as a linguist still, but he did some linguistics at some point. And there was another person who came, in fact, to our department, but quit it after some time because there was no support. And as I said, the whole education system is biased against deaf people. But certainly also other issue is that linguistics is a very scientific discipline, and it uses lots and lots of methodologies which are scientific, not just descriptive. So it uses lots of symbols and formulas, graphs, etc. And tree diagrams, the thing that I do, syntax, it's full of tree diagrams, so graphs really. So all that need to find accessible format. And if you don't use those, then the linguistics that you teach is not going to be really linguistics. It's very diluted. And that would mean just a basic knowledge of languages rather than linguistics. So these issues are real issues that we need to work out. But as I said, the hope is that because of the technological innovations, we should be able to do this at a much faster speed, and a deaf student will be able to access it in the format. So even if we don't have to wait for government policies, but as just a teacher who is aware of the technological development can adopt that and set up an example of creating a module in sign linguistics, teaching of. So there is one student who has been writing to our department for several years, wanted to do a kind of a research degree with me, a PhD, and we could not take him because we always required a grounding in linguistics first properly, and then an MPhil level research, and then PhD. But if we can make certain provisions that a deaf person who has otherwise will have deep knowledge of the language, sign language, should be given certain kind of direct entry if they have the basic knowledge, basic idea of linguistics, even if they have not done an MPhil degree level program. Those kind of adjustments, if we make and have more freedom, we should be able to produce deaf linguist sooner.
Great. So could I just ask a question to you about when you say we,
Yes.
who would you refer to? So would it be the universities or who?
Yeah, I think it is like from all sides. When I say we, if I'm probably talking about policymaker. and activism both. Okay, so the first step would be to sit together with the university authorities. The first step will be to have the technological know-how. First of all, if it is available, that technology we can adapt. We don't need the university even to give permission for that. Then sit with the authorities, because this is what we used to do in equal opportunity cell. Case by case, we used to fight with the authorities, and we did. I did myself personally, not just for Delhi University, but for whole UGC. Into 2014, we created a disability mission and the exam reform document. Uh, we have to, case by case, we have to argue with the university authorities that these things should be allowed. A student with, let's say, a deaf student whose mother tongue is sign language, should be allowed to have a direct entry into this if otherwise found suitable in the basic linguistics knowledge. And why for linguistics or other disciplines as well? We could do this, but for each of these policies to develop at a local level, so at the university versus the, let's say, equal opportunity cell of that university, that kind of thing, that finally puts a push to a body like centralized body like UGC, and then it becomes the policy. But the struggle has to come from our perspective, from there. So I think this is the kind of activism that we can afford to, and we need to also get into.
Actually, I I recall my accountancy teacher very fondly now. I'm just giving a different kind of note on accessibility and accommodation. I was doing commerce group in 11th standard. So in accountancy class, I used to keep quiet because I cannot see the board and debit, credit, liability, asset. So after the class, I went to him. Sir, I want to come for a special tuition. I cannot see the board. Then he said, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. I went to a mainstream school for my 11th grade. Then in the next class onwards, he started articulating what he was writing on the blackboard. Left, debit, right, credit, left, liability, right, property, and so on. And he did that for a week. And after that, I started, I told him, so I don't need the description anymore. All you need to do is tell the name of the nature of the transaction. I'll be able to tell whether it is liability or property. And then, that kind of a method, then it turned out to be not only great for me, but all my classmates, including the fact. So the point is this: accessibility will not come from anywhere. It is how we innovate with what we have. Tactile technologies will come, but it may not be available beyond Delhi or Madras. But we have to go for it, fight for it. But there are many other million ways of thinking about accessibility and accommodation. I'm saying with fond remembrance of my accountancy classroom.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Dr. Tanmoy, for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, the participants, for those questions that you had posed. Over to you, Dr. Haim.
Great. Professor Tanmoy, you not only talked about linguistics and sign language interface, but as usual, about how to teach, how to arrive at policy decisions, how to do mentoring with personal examples, anecdotes. Again, I thought I was connecting with you as though I was in Delhi in one of those
Reading groups. Yeah.
Very good. So, all of you participants here, I think we enjoyed the session, and we look forward to our tomorrow talk with teaching science for children. That's tomorrow's topic. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Neeta. We'll see.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. Thank you, Nita and Hem. I just wanted to put the message out that if anybody wants to get in touch with me, my email is tanmoy1@gmail.com. tanmoy1@gmail.com. Okay, so if any of the issues or any issues beyond this, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you, Hem, for inviting me. This was a good discussion, I think.
Thank you very much. Yes, you've brought in the linguistic perspective to sign language. So thank you so much for being with us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeta.